now. Good morning. It's July 13th, 2023. I'm Suzanne McAllister, retired psychologist, and this is my fifth conversation with Eunice Schatz, author, elder, co-creator of Lifework Direction. And Eunice, just before we started, mentioned that she has had a memory that I guess keeps coming up. But it sounded from what you said that it was a significant event in your life or something that you can see weaves through your whole life. And so we thought that's what we would start with today. So Eunice, take it away.
Okay, who would have thought that the memory I had was of a coal bin and me as an 8-year-old child, but it did come up. And so just to indicate what it is, when I was 8 years old, our family moved from rural New England village to Kansas City. They had streetcars, they had parks, they had a museum and everything. Well, this is in the spring. I think it must have been around Easter. We went to church, and when Sunday school time came, they herded us into separate rooms according to age. And my memory is of this little 8-year-old girl with her new dress she's being careful of, and she's looking around and it's full of coal dust. We're in the basement and there's this great big, what do you call them? Do you have a name for them? The things that you carry heat with, You mean I didn't even know what it was, but it was because we cooked around a wood fire in New England. And so, but the thing that I knew at the time was this wasn't right. It wasn't right, dare I say it, educationally. That would not have been my word for it then. But I just knew it was wrong to put 8-year-old kids in a dusty, dingy thing, and try to interest them in something. And so when I thought about that, that's a thread in my life. And later, when I was old, we moved from Kansas City then to a suburb, and it was a college town. And when I went to that college, I majored in Christian education, which looks at how do you set up a situation, both sociologically and psychologically, where kids can learn. So that must have been in my being even then. And I eventually got a master's in it and everything. And then when I graduated, there were very few places in America where you'd hire a Christian education consultant. It just wasn't, it was too primitive then.
Would that have been like the 1940s or later?
1950.
Okay.
1950. And there was one option and I turned it down. I couldn't picture it, but I was waiting because already I had been enticed by an organization that had started right on that campus for kids and for churches who needed to realize that you need more than Sunday. You need to have weekday activity. And they had camp, and that's where I got acquainted. I want to be with kids in an educational framework where you can play with them, where the body is, the senses are
Looks like you were frozen.
What?
Eunice, yeah, you froze there for about a minute. You were talking about wanting to be in a setting where children got to move and all their senses were stimulated, and then you froze. So if you can pick up from there.
And when I read a book by Robert Coles called The Spiritual Life of Children,
I remember that,
it
yes.
made so much sense, because he was just going at it blindly, but he found that was true. And I just felt good about that.
Can
And
I ask a
then
question?
more recently,
Can I interrupt just for a moment and ask a question? So it sounds like what you're saying is that that experience as the 8-year-old being brought into the basement, you're in your Sunday finery and you're being asked to learn in this dusty, coal-filled room and thinking something here doesn't work, and that kind of stayed with you. And then as you continued with your education and you went into Christian education as a profession, calling, career, whatever you want to call it, you can trace it back to that experience. Is that what you're saying?
I knew that the way that particular college embraced that concept of Christian ed was very modern and not just the Sunday school routine. It was more holistic.
And I'm wondering what school was that you're talking about?
It's Wheaton College in Illinois. There's 2 Wheaton colleges. It's the one in Illinois.
Okay. So anyway, continue on. Yeah.
Well, the other thing that's more present is recently I realized that somebody who came to Life Work Direction and we talked about, she's taught preschool and she's good at it. And so she decided at a certain point she'd start her own. So she did. And of course, she didn't view it with the philosophy that was so good and everything. But she wasn't an administrator. She didn't like that. And so she decided instead, she went back for more background of another kind that might have been more helpful psychologically. And she decided that she wanted to be a spiritual director or caretaker of children. She wanted to do it directly, one on a few and everything. And she was very imaginative. I wish she could be here and just describe. She's so lively and lovely and everything. And it meant for me, because the thing I'm dealing with in my life right now is my basic need to re-examine and look at my relationship to my mother, which I had sort of felt negative about in part. And I suddenly realized that what that kind of Christian education is psychological mothering. And I began thinking about how parents, and I'm thinking about that because of kids nowadays in their 20s are leading the church. So there's a sociological and a psychological, it just ties together everything in my life. My interest in the immense richness of the senses and the way psychology takes the whole person into account, and the sociological dimension, of what institutions can provide that make that happen.
So I'm hearing 2 threads. Let's try to delve into one and then maybe go back to the other. One is you made a comment about young people are leaving the church now, and it sounds like you have thoughts about that. And then you also said something about how you're re-examining your relationship with your mother. And I don't know which of those feels more resonant with you right now that you might want to say a little bit more
They
about.
combine. It's Mother Church. The reason young people are leaving is because they had a Mother Church that was very, kind of 1, 2, 3, and maybe ignored some of the things that in my experience in my career with the organization where I was at camp with kids, it was so flowing. It was utterly natural to feel that you loved the creator, and it didn't feel the way that sometimes churches in that era did, and it still have in some respects. So that's how I connect the two.
And are you saying that, I guess maybe I heard you say that the church can be mothering and I guess reordering a relationship that one has with one's biological mother, but you said that you were re-examining or maybe having a different sense of your relationship with your mother. And I wonder.
Yes, because my mother was more old line religiously. And one day, when I was an adult, I was in my 30s at least, and maybe more, we were driven someplace, and she turned to me in the car. We stopped the car outside the house. She turned to me, and with a very tight expression on her face, but she says, "Eunice, what do you believe?" She also once said, "Ever since you saw that therapist."
Okay.
And we made a cross, and we went back into the house, and I had tried in the car to explain to her how I held my faith in a much, and I said, "Mother, you have no idea what is maybe before you. You may find yourself soaring." I mean, her husband had just died and everything. We were there because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So we went back into the house, and I sat down and I started making a puzzle, because I like puzzles, in the living room. And she was back in her bedroom, and in a minute she came creeping up, and she had a little pamphlet. And it's just one of those little pamphlets. It had some spiritual things on it. But across the front of it was the word soaring.
Hmm.
And she was saying, "I accept you as you are."
Yes. Yes.
I haven't told that story to anyone before. And so, I mean, I didn't plan to include that in what we were talking today. You always bring out something you don't even know you're doing it. Maybe it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. It's yes.
I just would love it of course, if people would see the whole pattern and be able to jigsaw it together. But that's not my job.
Mm-hmm.
But I can witness to it, and you can see where it is in you, whatever.
Well, I will. All I can say about me and what I'm doing here is I'm interested. And that's, I think, what happens is you might say something, and if I can't quite picture it, then I ask a question. So,
and that helps me see other things I didn't see. it takes me into my experience instead of trying to pull the thing together in an orderly way.
Well, who was it? Carl Rogers, who talked about unconditional positive regard. And he was, I would say, the person who I felt most stimulated by when I was training to be a psychologist. And I loved how he essentially, my sense of him was, if you are authentically interested in someone and you're sitting across from them, whether it's a formal therapeutic setting or something like this, where two people who have known each other and had a relationship over a quarter century are talking, and you're experiencing my interest in what you're saying, because I don't think I've ever heard you talk about your mother before. And so I'm getting a picture of her as being maybe a little bit more, I don't know whether formal or going by the rules. And you were perhaps, as often happens when the younger generation starts, doing what they're doing, it can feel like rule breaking or being creative or doing things in your own way. And that it sounds like you got the feeling that she wasn't appreciating what you were doing, but then you had this experience with her and you realize, no, she does get what I'm doing and she appreciates it. And I don't know whether sanctions it is the right word, but it was a moment of connection between you and your mother. At a very tender moment for both of you. She had lost her husband and you had lost your father.
No, she married him because of his freedom.
She married your father, you're saying?
Yeah, he was, I know that he had a large heart. So when I faced the two of them with some problems that I had primarily with my mother, he wrote back, "Thank you for that bright spirit of independence." I didn't know how they would both receive what I said. I was criticizing them. And I felt that I was mostly my mother, but I also said to him that you didn't intervene.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
Or soften it or something.
So I'm thinking, as we've been talking about this, that I don't know whether it's fair to say, but these conversations that we've been having, which then in between time, you find yourself thinking about things like what you just shared, this experience with your mother and the thread that went from that basement room when you were 8 to all the way up to that drive in the car with your mother, and your mother turns to you and says, "Well, what do you believe, Eunice?" And you see a thread through all of that.
I think it came to me because I'm in a process continually of mining the things that I need to correct because I'm seen as a psychological, sort of a spiritual mother to other people.
Yes. And I was just thinking, Eunice, how appropriate that you are mining and you went back to that room with the coal dust.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a good time for us to maybe end this conversation that we're having today. Is there anything else that you want to say before we say goodbye today?
No, I can't right now. I just have another call from a dear person who suffers much more than I.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
well then
she's
I'll
a
let
very
you.
brave person,
Oh,
and it's wonderful. And I want to talk with her.
okay, well, I can
I'm sorry.
feel that as you speak about her. I hope you have a good call with her, and thank you for being there today, and thank you for what you shared.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.